Hi, my name is Roy, and welcome to my presentation. So to start with a bit of context, there are several different populations of Pacific salmon and trout that are listed as vulnerable or endangered in the Pacific Northwest area. That group also being known as Oncorhynchus, which includes all of these species on the left. Given their status, they're more vulnerable to environmental threats such as wildfire, which we'll be addressing. I think most of us have seen what's been happening on the West Coast in the past few years. Our wildfires are bigger and hotter than ever before, especially after about 100 years of snuffing out our naturally occurring ones. And now our understanding of how to deal with their impacts is struggling to keep up. You can see in Figure 1, one of the major wildfire impacts on salmon is excessive fine sediment deposit. That's sand, silt, clay, or ash that can make its way into rivers and streams via precipitation or floods after a fire, which can be detrimental to spawning by way of smothering eggs or reducing connection between streams, in some cases, even directly wiping out salmon. Unfortunately, there is a sore lack of collaborative restoration work focused on addressing these impacts and integrating salmon work with forest management in the realm of wildfire resilience. So that brings me to my research questions, being what are effective methods of mitigating wildfire impacts on salmon, and what barriers are there to integrating these methods? To answer these questions, I collaborated with a working group at the Nature Conservancy dedicated to research and work addressing salmon forests and fires. So I conducted literature review and interviews with a handful of different individuals at TNC, including fish biologists, forest managers, and tribal land managers to get their opinions on what they think is missing. And through that, I learned a lot, so I'm going to share just a bit of that here. Out of several methods, I found three main ways to bolster wildfire resilience for salmon, which are one, reducing excess fine sediment. So, like I said, too much fine sediment can mean disaster for salmon populations. So, treatments like beaver dam analogs can mimic naturally occurring beaver dams and intercept sediment while still allowing the passage of fish. You can see an example right next to that, which was done by the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho, successfully reducing the amount of fine sediment draining into a critical steelhead habitat. Secondly, we have enhancement of salmon habitat, which can mean a number of things, like say planting of coniferous trees or other plants that might provide salmon with nutrients and shade. But there is also the removal of dams and culverts, which can increase connection between streams. That's important for salmon so they can more successfully migrate from place to place. And on the left, you can see like a bunch of trees tipped over into the stream, which helps with providing salmon with a more complex habitat which gives juveniles, especially, more hiding places and makes feeding easier for them. And last but not least is proactive fire management as opposed to reactive fire management, which, like I said, just involves putting out fires and dealing with the damage afterwards. Proactive management, on the other hand, can come in the form of tree thinning or prescribed fire, the latter of which is the regular and intentional setting of fire. Both of these methods of which encourage healthy growth and reduce how much fires spread. Now, these projects are typically proposed by tribal nations. However, they run into a number of issues. For starters, unstable funding and lack of personnel. For funding for projects done with the U.S. Forest Service, as an example, can be pulled or stalled easily. And then there is the issue of lack of communication between tribal and state managers, since tribal inclusion and restoration work, but just land management in general is still in its infancy, making the process a lot more difficult. And when it comes to prescribed burning in specific, land managers might be hesitant to take on projects because of public anxiety about them going wrong in some way. So what can be done about these things? In my conversations there were some common threads that essentially boiled down to a couple of things, that being it's important to dispel misconceptions about fire and how it interacts with our ecosystems, because even the most basic knowledge can affect perceptions of both the public and professionals alike. For example, I spoke with fish biologist Rebecca Flipcroft, who commented that fish biologists tend to have the idea that fire is always a catastrophe for fish, which isn't true. We just need to work on improving conditions for quote unquote good fire so we can in turn, have less bad fire. And lastly, communication and co-stewardship are things to work towards. That means both improving upon the relationships between managers, but also managers and civilians. All in all, it's especially important work because of our current administration and the risks it poses to agencies like the U.S. Forest Service or even, the Endangered Species Act. But hopefully, by garnering more support for these programs and these projects, we can make way for better informed restoration of both our salmon and our forests. That's all. Thank you to my site supervisors, Eileen and Michelle, and my faculty advisor, Dr. Ernesto Alvarado, for their support, and thank you for listening.